All right, click the links, join channel here over at SubScribeStar. So, Black Snape on HBO. The thing you have to know about the left is they are what a collection of useful idiots. They're completely brainwashed into accepting the most nonsense rules based on the opinions of Frankfurt School Bolsheviks and critical theory, which is all just anti-white globalist techniques to destroy nations by subversion and corruption. And if you think that sounds a little bit tinfoil hat, look around at your present society and join us in a Faraday cage nationalism. Title says Harry Potter potentially casting a black man. I don't know why that's in capitals. As Snape sparks istophobic reaction from one of the mentally ill writers at the Mary Sue, who honestly sounds like she's using an AI bot to help her write some of these articles. The thing is, there's no shortage of left-wing useful idiots to support them in whatever kind of nonsense they think of. They won't. There is no. What are there is no istophobicism. That's just a technique that the globalist media uses to manipulate gullible sheep. They won't ever question the narrative or think for themselves if they were whatever Pavlovian response they were programmed to. They fully accept it. They won't even they completely lack self-awareness because they want to people please. They want to stay in the center of their social acceptance group. Everything is off limits because once you question something even minor that is illogical, it leads you down the rabbit hole to questioning everything, and you pull on that thread and it all starts to fall apart. And it's the left wing. What a transformation. Fighting for free speech back in the day to fighting for censorship and not to cross-examine some of the dogma of the left. So what happened is there's a character in Harry Potter, professor at the university, Snape, who's complex for a children's story, which shouldn't be a big deal. He fits the story. Guy can be a little bit of a jerk, but Harry Potter's parents and their friends were also jerks. They're just typical, narcissistic young people like we all used to be. Yes, I read the books, but for much of the story, Snape is malicious and a suspect, and of course is described in the book as fair of countenance. And if she originally wrote him as anything other than that European coded, the left probably would have lost their minds. The left wasn't as brainwashed back then I think she was writing the books like in the 90s, and I guess they came out because it seemed like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and Harry Potter all came out from like 2000, 2005, around then. Anyway, the book is supposed to have an old European castle and magic vibe to it, which it does very well, which is better with using European people, at least for the protagonists. If you had to, you could use, I guess, non-Euros for the antagonists, and that would kind of fit the dynamic better and trigger the leftists, which is only too sweet. But Rowling was woke for the time, just not woke enough for the current time, because woke isn't a destination. It's a journey whose goal is to subvert and corrupt. It just keeps moving on into where we are now with the absurd of her being the left wing trying to cancel her. Not doing too well in canceling the video games for saying, I guess, men aren't women, and left-wing kids believe they are. No, it's more complicated than that. You understand. The communist dialectic predicts, yes, you're going to say a lot of words. 20-year-old weed-smoking, brainwashed by their teacher, but none of those things matter, and in a few decades you'll go, oh, it was just a fad, wasn't it? So HBO decides to bring the show to streaming, which they should have done a long time ago, and this will be interesting to watch because the left, they say they're going to boycott it, but that means that they'll watch it but deny watching it. It's like a form of virtue signaling. So HBO decided to race swap Snape, and the left is panicking because they can't allow any non-Euro character to be shown in a negative light at all. And they very much feel a need to gatekeep. I'll go to Blue Sky in a sec and show you they're insane. The normie left-winger and the normie right-winger, whoever's in that middle of political bell curve, you really need to see how much these people hate you simply based on your race. Like, you really got to get it through your head that you're not going to meet in the middle with people who racially hate you. The left wing's the racist the whole times? Yes, they have been. So the left is kind of panicking over this because if you only have characters in one role divided by ethnicity, that kills storytelling, because it means that all brown characters have to be Mary Sue, soulful saints, and the blonde-haired people are always going to be the bad guys, which destroys the willing suspension of disbelief. But the woke crowd doesn't care about the organic story. In fact, they're like, the organic story is it's like, that's far right extremism. I mean, the past 10,000 years of stories have been, yes, in their minds, it's like, yeah, only the past 20 years counts. Everything to them is only useful to carry Bolshevik propaganda, so their stories are very formulaic, to the point where you can take 1,000 characters and divide them into 2 columns based on skin tones, probably hair and eye as well, and the good guys will simply be darker shades than the antagonists. That's how cut and dried it is. They don't care. People will do studies on globalist media bias, and someone was just this study on PBS, and in a ratio of like dozens to one, they were left-wing biased in their coverage of stories and the words they choose to describe the far left versus the far right, because they didn't see extreme toxic left-wing behavior because they were the ones who were pushing it. And there was another interesting article in the Mary Sue about people were doing some silly, this is the thing, some silly lookalike contest, and it was just silly lightweight fluff, but the TikTok communists were telling their people to go out there and use it as a chance to pass out communist propaganda, and it never crossed their mind like, oh, hey, you're going to take some fun event that these guys are putting on to push a far left agenda. It's like, well, how would you feel if the right wing came along and pushed a far right agenda, pass out their pamphlets as well? And to them, it never crosses their mind. It's like, they don't have the right to do that. It's like, you're pushing communist propaganda. And I mean that in a neutral sense, advertising essentially. It's like, if nationalists come out and push their propaganda, it's like, don't you see that there's going to be conflict where there simply didn't need to be? It's like a frisbee competition, but these TikTok globalists see it as a chance to pass up propaganda. It's like, or you could just let people have a frisbee competition or a look-alike competition, because obviously, you're the one bringing in the conflict. You want to bring in pamphleteering, proselytizing for the left wing. It's like, well, that just brings in the right wing, and now you're at loggerheads, and now the thing that was just a fun, apolitical type of event has now turned political, because these filthy communist vermin parasites can't just let people have a good time. And that kind of idea is what that's a lesson that Hollywood is learning, because most of the things that Hollywood is putting out are obviously things that you have to pay for, and people just look at this stuff and think, yeah, it's just not worth it. And the other thing the Mary Sue girl was whining about that lookalike contest was not having enough female representation. But the problem was there's nothing stopping women from entering. The point is, the left looks at people just having fun, and they see it as a chance to capture it, subvert it, and corrupt it to push a narrative, and they don't give a darn if it destroys the thing. The thing is just a vector to carry the disease. And the problem with woke movies is people don't watch them, but that doesn't matter to the woke crowd, because the Nazi chuds should want to be educated by these anti-white globalist propaganda movies. Reality doesn't. How well did that work with Indiana Jones Part 5? Reality doesn't matter to them. They really can't allow a non-Euro person to play a negative role, which is why you see the most bizarre plot lines of people bending over backwards to control a narrative. You'll see a lot of South African diamond cartels. Of course, they're all blonde, evil, istophobic people dropping N-bombs for some reason, or blonde Russian mafia, or blonde German terrorists, or blonde motorcycle gangs. You get the idea. It's ridiculous when you get a lineup of movies, for the past 50 years. Like, some of the movies you thought were so cool, and then you start looking at them, you're like, this is ridiculous. What was it, the Die Hard movie with Bruce Willis back in the 80s? Absolutely ridiculous. Or even John Wick, or even, I forget what the South African diamond thing was, but you start adding up these movies, you're like, how did we not notice this? And that's the thing, is once you put on the They Live glasses and you really start seeing this stuff, you look at all the old movies and they're just crap. They just a few things hold up, but a lot of stuff, you see that kind of propaganda, and it's like, even Star Wars holds up a little bit, the original 77. Anyway, and obviously when I point out that it's not blondes who are pulling the strings on all those kind of behavior. The inverse is actually true. They lose their minds because reality is offensive to them. The straw man is not offensive. They want the world to be a certain way. They want the Slytherins to be blondes out of Aryan central casting, because that is who Hollywood told them to hate. And I was thinking about this the other night. If you had control of Hollywood, which obviously we don't, and you turned it around from hating, instead of hating blonde hair, blue eyed people, to hating this guy, his tribe, in a few years it would happen, and you would just subvert and corrupt anything, because it's, unfortunately, repetition of a message is like 90% of the thing. And the only, in controlling people's behavior, the whitest of white pills now is that as things get more decentralized, the mainstream lizards are losing control. So if you ask them if you could just make a movie with people in the roles that you'd actually see in real life, saying that very carefully for our puppet masters, and they flat out are triggered by it because reality is unacceptable to them, which is why I keep saying Hollywood is just going to continue to shrink. They're trying to brainwash the younger generations into thinking that gangs, terrorists, drug dealers are 100% blonde German types. But younger audiences are tuning out of the mainstream because they're watching social media, very short attention span type of theater, video games or Japanese cartoons, that kind of stuff. Our generations, the older generations, over 40, had a lifetime of TV propaganda, and we're finally leaving it behind. They had some BBC show, or no, not BBC, it's some Swedish broadcasting show about the history of the early Swedish, I guess, came out this year, and they're using sub-Saharan Africans to play the early Swedish people, because the early Europeans, based on testing, they had slightly more tan skin, like the Mediterranean Europeans, who are still obviously European people. So the globalists, of course, naturally, instead of just using Italians, Cecil for you, to play the role, they get sub-Saharan Africans to play the role. Like that wasn't who the Europeans were. That's absurd. Of course it's absurd. It's part of the humiliation ritual of a conquered people to see what kind of absurdities you will accept, so that as they commit the atrocities to you, sit back, laugh, and play the violin. That's where we are. With absurdity like this, the mainstream is just going to fade away because it's just a bridge too far for people. Their goal is to race swap everything to make the kids confused and think that their race apparently never existed. It was always non-Europeans in all these roles. So no, woke is not going anywhere. That was some right-wing normie copium. With the Walmart thing. Woke is their religion. It doesn't just go away on its own. The other thing they whine about is not enough POCs in the original books, except, I mean, that's such a stupid, people of color, such a stupid phrase, because no other group has the beauty and diversity of the European people. The rest of the world sort of kind of oddly falls flat. It's like these magical light hair and light-eyed high elves among all the grubby hobbits, which are just kind of as common as dirt. I think, just kidding. I think the meant that there are not many non-Europeans in the books, and yes, that's a good thing. There shouldn't be any. I mean, unless they're the bad guys or something, because the story doesn't need them. Not everything has to be globalist propaganda. You can have different shows for different people. It's just enough. We need to stop trying to force everyone together. We don't want to be together in every single thing. All it does is cause conflict, which is kind of the goal, to get people to discuss this conflict, and then they point to one side and say, see, you're istophobic. And we look back at them and go, no, actually, you're the istophobic ones because you hate us based on our ethnicity. The left are the globalists, but most people naturally are nationalists and very tribal. There needs to be a different entertainment for different people. Most people are sick and tired of diversity. I have woke PTSD. I just can't watch a movie with a non-Euro Mary Sue in it. It's too formulaic. So I've been traumatized, and I need movies to be fair and blonde as possible. We don't value diversity or feminism. That's great because different strokes and all that. The left should have their monkeypox and AIDS movie about trans, furry, lesbian, otherkin, and we should have our base Chads and Stacy movies. Obviously, we're not going to get it because, we're not pulling the strings in Hollywood, which just means Hollywood is over for us, which is fine because, that's what books are for. But in a few years, AI is going to be able to convert your story into a movie, and it's probably going to be passable. And then a few years from then, I don't think you're going to be able to tell the difference. But then I kind of would think there would be such a saturation of visual entertainment on the market that people would probably like the direction now is people going into live streaming because you're seeing something real and raw, and there's no, even though it's very unpolished, it's real, where everything else is just so carefully edited and clipped and massaged and fake. You're seeing a narrative, and people are kind of tired of it. Race swapping out the beautiful people of the light, us, is meant to cause conflict and bring the SJWs back to the show because they say, they're not going to watch the show in the first place. And it probably work. It will work. It probably will bring them back to the show because they're addicted to this kind of show. Shows in sequence, I don't know what you call those streaming shows, where they're serial, seem to be more of a left-wing theme anyway. But I always hear people talking about shows, whether it's the Marvel stuff or the Disney stuff, people who are like, every Thursday night at 8 o'clock, they're watching these shows, and they take it seriously. And like, I can't wrap my mind around, watching TV at all, or watching something in a series like that, or binge watching anything that's in the mainstream because it's so stupid. But there's a big audience for it, obviously. But it does seem to be a left-wing kind of thing where I guess they can just turn their brains off. Anyway, these people. What do you mean these people? Who would you pick to play Black Iron Man? And they show Robert Downey Jr. from that movie. See, he's black. They want to gatekeep everything. So even a show that they go, oh, well, I'm not going to watch it because J.K. Rowling believes that men are not women. What a Nazi, right? They go, they're not going to watch it, but they have to watch it because they have to educate everyone on how stupid, or how, I don't know, how problematic and marginalized and oppressed and disenfranchised and othered and all these other Saul Alinsky Frankfurt School useful idiot words that these people, these parrots, they just regurgitate without any cognition. It's all Pavlovian response. It bypasses. They don't stop to think about it. Like, wait a minute, these terms you only apply to one group. Wouldn't they naturally apply to everyone? It's like they will never have an open conversation. So the left wing has to censor and deplatform. Because if the right wing has free speech, we win. And we win everything. And, with things becoming more decentralized, alt media and video hosting, live streaming, and even alt payment processors, there's things on the horizon that are possible now that are just not possible before, where it was, you had Hollywood, this big machine, and the information went out from Hollywood into the user, and there was very little feedback. The feedback was by way of journalists controlling magazines and writing articles, and then maybe people would write articles to the newspaper, the magazines, but that was it. It was very much one-sided, and now things are just different. You can give feedback on these things. And somebody a couple weeks ago in my comment section said the left wing is accelerating. Hollywood is accelerating kind of because they know what's coming, and they're trying to get out ahead of it with this kind of. That's why the propaganda is just getting more and more egregious. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.